Hello, I'm Bob Rummel. I'm the chairman of the board of the Veterans Assistance Office in Rutland. The Veterans Assistance Office is an office of volunteers that has been working in Rutland with veterans since the early 70s. In 1993, the office decided to take on a project for homeless veterans. We looked around the area and found a home that had been abandoned with the idea of renovating the home so that we could give veterans a place, homeless veterans a place to transition from the street to a job in an apartment. What you see here today is the culmination of a 5-year project in building that will house up to 14 veterans for up to a period of 6 months while they readjust to our society after being homeless and on the street for probably many years. This is a structure which was abandoned back in 1993. It had originally been 2 homes back in the 20s, with the smaller section being pushed back towards the brook. Somewhere in the 20s, they moved that section forward and attached it to the main structure. As you see, it's just about 99% complete at this point. And on Memorial Day, we're going to have an open house where we invite the community and other interested parties to come in and take a look at our work. The way that we attacked the project was that we took the small L addition and finished it first and actually opened it to service for veterans. This section of the home had been open for 3 years when we started working on the larger section 2.5 years ago. When we went into this project, we started looking for funding to help us support the project. The only funding we could come up with initially was through the state. Tony Morgan, who at that point and still does works with homeless money in the state, was kind enough to give us about $17,000 to renovate the small section of the house. We did that within 1.5 years and opened for business, leaving the larger portion for a later project and more funding. What happened was that the Veterans Administration decided that they, at that time, were not going to fund new projects, but they would fund existing projects. So because we already had one small section of the house open, we qualified for funds to renovate the larger section. We renovated the larger sections with about $65,000 that was given us out of Washington by the Veterans Administration. We'd like to take you on a little tour of the house and show you how the veterans are going to be. We'd like to take you on a small tour of the house and show you how the veterans are going to be living here and working in this community. Suffice it to say that when we took this project on, this house was a blight in the neighborhood. It was abandoned. Someone had ripped all the plumbing out of it. I think, judging from the graffiti that was on the walls when we first took it over, it was used as some sort of a drug cult place. There were also some satanic kinds of signs that someone had painted on the walls. Actually, our neighbor over here, probably one of the best neighbors you could ever hope to have, woke up one morning and there were little footprints in the snow from this house, which was abandoned, over to his house, every window on the first floor. So I think that one thing that we've been able to do is to rejuvenate this place, give it another 100 years of life for sure, and to improve the neighborhood so that, well, we don't just have an abandoned property boarded up here on the corner anymore. This is the interior of the first floor. You can see as we go along that it's a pretty wide open space. We obviously removed a lot of the walls so that the gentlemen and women who are going to be living here have sort of a communal kind of existence. The kitchen, which you're seeing now, I think you're going to think is pretty nice, and actually it is pretty nice. It's a lot better than what I have in my house. The philosophy of the board and the philosophy of the people that are going to contribute time to work with the homeless population that we serve believe that if we provide an excellent place for them, we will model the kind of existence that is possible for them, so that they're going to come into a house that is probably better than most of any of us live in. That was the point behind it. The cabinets that you see are made on site. They're basically plywood cabinets. They just happen to be done in a certain fashion that makes them seem really nice, and they actually are. The stove, the gas stove, which is not a commercial gas stove, but very close to, was bought with funds donated by General Electric. The commercial refrigerator and other items that we use here were purchased from a daycare center that went out of business. So we've been looking for bargains at every corner and have been pretty successful at finding them. Showcase Appliances have given us great deals on most of the appliances that we need for the house. Now, if you move to your left, you'll see a little room off behind the refrigerator. That room is, in fact, a handicap accessible bedroom. It actually has a sink in there in the event that the person in the chair has to catheterize him or herself and has some privacy. When we're not going to be using it for handicap accessibility for one of our clients, we're going to set it up as a clinic. And we hope that the Veterans Administration will send a physician assistant or a physician over once a week so that the Rutland veterans don't have to travel across the mountain to see a doctor or a PA, that they can just come to the Dodge Center and in the privacy of that small room deal with what they have to, and that avoids them having to be on the road in essence all day. They usually leave here at 7 o'clock in the morning, don't go back till 6 at night. So we think that's going to be a real bonus for the community. This large area that we're standing in is actually a kitchen eating area and a small sitting and TV area. Since most of the people here will be part of the kitchen patrol, so to speak, we're going to have sort of a large kind of communal cook each night to make them feel that they're part of this organization, and this is actually their home. Off to the left is the nerve center and the office. As you come in the door, we have a double door into the office where our director will be housed most of the time. In around the corner in the back, we have a handicap accessible bathroom with a complete shower with grab bars and everything, so that if we had someone who was totally in need of all handicap services, they would be available here. The counter heights in the kitchen are low. They're down under 34 inches, so that someone in a wheelchair could easily maneuver and use the counters that we have there. The facility is totally handicap accessible. On the second floor, there are 2 staircases to the second floor. One in the back also doubles as a fire exit because it's separated from the main core of the house with firewalls, and comes down to an outside deck where you can egress from the building, exit from the building. The other one towards the front of the house is quite a project. The stair itself is over 20 feet long, going from the first floor to the second floor. That is because there is a requirement by the Veterans Administration that the stairwell be what we call cane or walker accessible. What that means is that you cannot rise over 6 3/4 inches for each step that you take forward. Now, when you get into these old houses and you have 10 feet between floors, you can see that it's sort of like an inclined bowling alley to get from one floor to the other. Once on the second floor, we have 5 bedrooms. Every bedroom has a window. We expect to house 2 veterans per bedroom. And in the front is a bathroom with a couple showers and a couple johns and a couple sinks. There's a front deck for smoking. There is no smoking in this facility, so that smoking will be done outside on the back decks or up on the upper deck out front.
Well, Bob Rummel, Chairman of the Board of the Veterans Assistance Office.
Correct.
Thank you for that tour.
Sure.
Bob gave us that tour yesterday of the Dodge House, which is on Crescent Street in Rutland. Why don't we just start off by telling a little bit of history about the house. We haven't really heard a lot about it in the past few years. It sort of started, then you didn't hear a lot about it, and now all of a sudden there's a really nice looking house on Crescent Street. Looks like it's almost ready to be moved into.
Sure. That was actually by design. A lot of people thought it was kind of a stutter step, that we were going to do something and then we didn't do it and they forgot about us. But one of the things that we were always leery of, because it was totally a volunteer project for the most part, putting the project together, which meant that we built it on our spare time. It was very difficult to put a timeline on exactly when we'd open the door.
Right.
So we've been kind of quiet, and it's been, progressing year by year by year over the last 5 years, and we're at the point now where the project is almost finished. So it's time to start saying to people, look what we have here. Do you want to be part of it? Do you want to work with homeless veterans? We'd like to have you come on down.
Okay, the Dodge House. Is there a story behind the name?
The house is named after a veteran that most of us in the area knew. His name was Mike Dodge. Mike was a Vietnam veteran, a decorated Vietnam veteran, a recipient of the Purple Heart, and suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder. He went to the Veterans Administration trying to seek assistance. He had some assistance from the vet centers. He was having a lot of difficulty dealing in his day-to-day life, and eventually he committed suicide. And I often thought that if we had a place where a Mike Dodge could come and just sort of have a safe haven among other veterans to deal with the kinds of problems that Mike was dealing with, that maybe Mike be alive today. You know, maybe he wouldn't have committed suicide. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of the impetus behind the Dodge Development Center, the Dodge House, right. Named after Mike Dodge.
What a tribute.
Well, I think that for us, it means a lot. Mm-hmm. It means a lot because many of us, I mean, I've worked with veterans in the States since '78. I actually stopped for a period of time working with veterans because we were in the business of finding jobs and employment for veterans. And the people that we were dealing with were just, we could find them a job, but they couldn't hold it. You know, they needed more help. They needed more intensive care, mm-hmm. more skills, that kind of thing. What they needed was residential placement. And it wasn't until this project came along that we saw a chance for that kind of residential placement.
Okay, I want to talk about who will be utilizing the Dodge House, but let's talk about you for a second. You've been a mover in this. I understand you've been putting a lot of your own time in.
Right.
You made those cabinets that we saw.
Yes, right.
Did a lot of the labor
right.
yourself.
Well,
give us a little bit of history about Bob Rummel.
Yeah. Well, I'm a Vietnam veteran, mm-hmm. Combat veteran. I served with 101st Airborne Division in Vietnam in 1968 and 69. When I got back from the war, I became the administrative assistant to the governor of Maryland for Veterans Affairs in the early 70s, and then came to Vermont to live in 1975. In 1978, I started working with a group of veterans on the Project for the Advancement of Veterans Employment, which was then known as PAVE, where we would find employment for vets, and we also did discharge upgrades and that kind of thing. The big pusher behind that was a guy by the name of Bill Fagerenauer, who still works with veterans up in the Burlington area. Money became short in the early 80s, and actually the only new program that was funded by the Reagan administration in the first year of his administration was the Vietnam Veterans Leadership Program. It was run by Tom Palkin out of Action in Washington. So we were funded under that program for about 4 years to continue our work under PAVE with veterans. And then around 84, 85, that money dried up and we sort of went out of the business. By that time, we had spent a lot of time working with veterans, and we had employed, I think, most of the veterans who were very, very employable. Hardcore unemployed, there wasn't much we could do with. They really needed intensive care. They needed work on their addictions, whether it be drugs or alcohol. They needed to work on their job skills. I mean, simple things like get up in the morning and go to work, and kind of a residential placement kind of place. So I did that, and then kind of after we closed that office, was working at Castleton, taught some courses on Vietnam, was the dean of students there for a while, and linked into the Veterans Assistance Office here in the early 90s, probably 91, 92. And then in 93, we had this opportunity, a guy by the name of Jim Edge at the time, found a home, a HUD house, an abandoned home, and said, gee, we could do this. And so I said, okay, well, I guess we can do this. So we took a look around the room and decided, let's see, well, who has an expertise in grant writing? Well, I have an expertise in grant writing. And who has an expertise in building? Well, I have an expertise in building, you know. I have those two things. So I said,
perfect example of knowing too much.
That's right, that's right. So I kind of wound up honchoing the project of the Dodge House because of those two things. One, I knew grants and grant money, and two, I knew construction. So we were able to work with a gentleman by the name of Tony Morgan, who works with the state and the state homeless, to get some money to renovate the small section of the house. We had about $17,000 to do that construction with all volunteer help. And we were able to open that side of the house for a short period of time, probably for a year and a half, for homeless veterans and to transition veterans through there and back out into the community. The Veterans Administration has a funny kind of a quirky thing in that they won't fund ideas. You know, they'll fund projects, but they won't fund ideas. So thanks to Tony and getting the money to have this small house, we were able to apply for funds for expansion of our existing project.
Right.
And when we got the expansion funds, of course, then we started working on the larger portion of the house. We got about $60,000 for that. At the time that money came in, we had a small ceremony down at the house. Some people may remember it. And then things got pretty quiet because it was just this trudging along, you know. Okay, what do we do now? What do we have to do next? You know, who can we get to help us do this? Who can we help with the drywall? Who can do the finish work? Who can paint it? Who can do the kitchens? You know, who can do the plumbing? I mean, it just goes on and on and on in any kind of construction project. And when you're talking mostly volunteers, you have to fit their time schedules.
Absolutely.
So it just doesn't happen overnight. And I understood that. Many people don't. You know, many people think, oh, well, it just took forever to get it done. Well, when you take a look at the house that we have today compared to the house that we got, forever isn't such a long time
It looks
you
beautiful.
think about that.
It looks beautiful.
Yeah.
Another Vietnam veteran, Tommy Neary.
Correct.
Gravely injured during the Vietnam War. Profoundly affected his life.
Right.
I would say passionate about this house. He puts a lot of time in himself.
Yes, he does.
When we were taking a tour, I noticed Purple Hearts on your plates.
Right.
Were you wounded in Vietnam?
Right. I was caught some shrapnel in the neck as a result of a firefight that we were in back in May 1st of 1968. And unlike Tommy, I never left the country. I went through the hospital system within the country and recuperated, and then, of course, went back to the war for another year. Tommy was sufficiently wounded that he actually left the country at that time and spent mega time, I think, in Boston in different programs for recuperation. So yeah, I'm a recipient of the Purple Heart, and as a result of combat in Vietnam.
And this house means a lot to you as well.
Right. Yes,
Obviously.
yeah, it does. I think that in a lot of ways, it's not as magnanimous as it sounds. It does a lot for me. You know, I enjoy thinking about the fact that my labor is going to work and to help some veterans, work for and to help some veterans who were maybe not as fortunate as I.
Right.
For whatever reason, I'm not on the street. You know, I maybe because of my upbringing, maybe because of my various experiences in the war, I was able to kind of hold it together, you know, to get jobs, to get education, to do those kinds of things. I haven't spent the last 30 years of my life banging my head against the wall every morning to get out of bed. I mean, you know,
Right.
it just doesn't happen to me. Could it happen tomorrow? Of course it could. I mean, you know, I know that. You know, I never dream about the war. And people say that until you dream about something, you haven't dealt with it. Well, that's fine. You know?
I see your logic.
I don't need it.
Now, the Dodge House is for veterans of all wars.
Correct.
And
Correct.
you think of homeless anybody, you think of somebody sleeping on a park bench or you know, rolled up in newspapers, but
Yes.
that's not necessarily the case, is it? I mean,
No. There are homeless who fit that profile. I mean, we see it on the news all the time. A lot of our homeless are mentally ill in one way, shape, or form, you know, unable to function in our society, unable to hold jobs, so they become homeless and they go out on the street. We deal with people who, for one reason or another, may have just lost it all in the last couple weeks. We dealt with a veteran who had been very successful at working at a job for 23 years, and they closed the shop. And all of a sudden, he had nowhere to go, you know, and he was on the street, and there was nothing for him to do. You know, his skills weren't needed. I mean, he was a shipbuilder, and you know, Vermont doesn't have a lot of shipbuilding industry, right? So before he could really put it together, he lost it all. Mm-hmm. So we helped him, you know, get a foot back up and start again. So there's a good example of a veteran who could have gone to the bottom, but you know, our safety net kind of caught him and brought him back before he hit the bottom. So I like to think of veterans that we work with as people who need assistance in becoming independent livers. They can be living with family. They can be living with mom and dad. They can be living with their sister. They can be living in a garage behind the brother's home, you know, something like that. And the hope is to get them before they get too comfortable with that, because it's very easy to have other people take care of you. I mean, it's not great for your ego, but when it comes to just sort of, you know, sliding down to looking to someone else to take care of your needs, that's a slippery slope. And that's the kind of thing that we try to reverse. You know, that our program is not there for you to come to go through another program. You know, go through this program that we call them program cruisers. To another program and go to another VA hospital and then to another program. I mean, there are people that do those kinds of things. Well, that's not what we're about. What we're really about is seeing people become independent livers, you know, have their own apartment, their own job, to build up their self-esteem where that's an important feature of their lives, again. Right. Because for a lot of people, they lose that sense of identity, you know, with job.
Now, the Dodge House is open to all vets.
All veterans of all wars, all veterans, period. Anybody
They
who
just have to
served.
walk in the door. Is there a process?
Yeah, usually there's a referral, because we're not a shelter per se. We are charged to shelter people if the mission is full. And I don't know if the mission has ever been full, but you know, unable to take them, yes, then we'll sleep people overnight. But we're really looking for people who go through a process to get to us. You know, they get referred to us by a Legion, by Serenity House, by Dismiss House, by one of the other organizations that deal with people in the state. We have a packet that we ask them to fill out that pretty much gives us a kind of an idea of what they want to do. We interview them, and then we ask them to come on board. The hope is that within 2 weeks of when they come to the house, that we'll do a plan with them as to where they want to be in 6 months, and then we'll help them work on that plan.
So it's not a social club.
It is not a social club.
I understand there are pretty strict rules and regulations as well.
Right.
Once you do get in the house.
Right. Well, one of the things that we're trying to recreate is that time when we think the veteran felt part of something, which was when they were in the service. So we have high structure. You know, get up at a time, go to bed at a time. Strict rules. You know, you don't smoke in the house. You don't drink in the house. You don't drug in the house. You have chores that you'll have to take care of. Take care of those kitchen cabinets, whatever. But it'll be highly structured, and that's because we think that structure was the last time that a lot of these veterans felt really positive, and they're looking back on that time as a very positive time in their lives at this point, not with great negativity.
Right.
So we're going to try to put them back into that situation.
Well, you've got the house looking beautiful.
Thank you.
And looks like you're ready to move in any day now.
That's
now
right.
you need to operate the place. Right? Operating funds, where are they going to come from?
Right. The operating funds, the closest I can come at this point, excuse me, of course, not having run the house yet, is that we're probably going to need between $100,000 and $120,000 a year to operate.
Not a tremendously large budget.
No, not when you're going to spend $2 million on a train station. I mean, you know, I wish I had $2 million. I just put it in the bank and we'd be set, you know, that kind of thing. But the Veterans Administration does have a program for homeless veterans. We can tap into some of their funding. We can get up to $15 a day per veteran to house a veteran at the center if we match it with another $15 from the community. There are programs under HUD that we can apply for grant money for startup funds for 3 years, probably a couple $100,000 a year for that kind of things. But we're trying to do is build a community base, project where people in our community would give ongoing funds. You know, that someone would say, okay, I can give you $500 a year, each year, for this project, that kind of thing. That's what we're looking for. The one-time shots are great. I mean, don't get me wrong. If somebody wants to send me $1,000, that's wonderful. We've gotten a lot of that kind of contribution to get it through the construction phase. And actually, that's the sexy phase, you know.
Yeah.
Let's see, you know, nice looking stove, nice looking cabinets, nice looking house, love your windows, you know, that kind of thing. And I bought that window, that, you know, that's terrific. But now it's the hardcore money, you know. Now we have to do what the project was meant to do. We have to serve veterans. And to do that, we need to hire a director, we need to hire night staff. You know, it's 24-hour, 7-day supervision in a facility of this nature. And it's money that has to come from somewhere, and we're working on that.
And you'd also establish a clinic there, ideally.
Our hope, the house was designed so that we have a handicap-accessible bedroom on the first floor and a handicap-accessible bathroom, full bath. The probability of housing someone that can't make it to the second floor, I don't know. You know, we may not. But when we're not using the handicap-accessible bedroom for a bedroom, we're going to try to turn it into an examining room, kind of a clinic focus area. And we hope that the Veterans Administration over in White River would be willing to send a doctor or a physician's assistant over 1 day a week so that the veterans in Rutland wouldn't have to go all the way to the hospital to see a doctor or a physician's assistant to get their meds and that kind of thing. The hope is that we could have this small outreach clinic from the VA come right to the house. They could also work and give physicals to our residents, as well as see other veterans in the area.
Makes a lot of sense. You know, we're running out of time, believe it or not.
Sure.
So if there was an organization, individual, or group out there that wanted to help the veterans of our country and Dodge House,
Sure.
Whether it be with time, labor, money, donations in kind, how would they go about doing that, Bob?
I think that the first thing you do is you just pick up the phone and you dial 775-6772 and talk to Clark Howland, who is our Director of Operations, and let him know what you'd like to do. Really, you know, the sky's the limit for what we can do here. Everything from donation of toothpaste and stamps to money and jobs for veterans. So that would probably be the first step. In lieu of that, if you're ever in the area, you know, at 95 Crescent Street, just knock on the door and come on down.
Go on and say,
you know, stay. Hi, how you doing?
I don't want to date this program because I'd like to run it past Memorial Day, but
of course.
we do have an open house coming up.
Yes, the 25th of May, which is I think the federal holiday for Memorial Day, we're going to open the doors from 10 to 4 for anyone who wants to come by and take a look at what we're doing and talk to us about what we're doing. Now, we're going to dedicate the building on Veterans Day, November 11th, 1998. So between the open house, when you're going to see some furniture and you're going to see the place open, by Veterans Day, we expect to have a full-blown operation ready to go.
Fantastic. Bob Rummel, thanks for coming by. And again, the Dodge House is just about complete. It's up and running.
Yes.
If you want to stop by Memorial Day, see it. There's going to be a dedication on Veterans Day.
Right.
And thank you for viewing Channel 15.